Hey everyone, this is Katie and Mike. Say hi, Mike.
Hi.
We were going to do a driving home the movie for this, but we ended up having issues with the camera, but it is good. And we thought we'd do just a short little vlog on the movie we just saw, which is, drumroll, you probably already know this because you're looking at the video title right now, it's Wanderlust. Yeah. It's a new Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd movie, and it was mediocre.
It was meh.
It was meh. It was the pure epitome of meh. And it wasn't meh all across the board, because there were definitely parts that were actually decent. I would even go good. There were jokes that were okay. The jokes weren't as funny, but there were a few characters here and there that were good. So really quickly, two yuppies who are dealing with some bad economy issues. They lose their jobs, and oh, spoiler alert, they lose their jobs in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and so they're going to be going to Paul Rudd's brother's house in Atlanta, and they end up stopping at a commune.
Bed and breakfast.
Yeah,
probably.
but pretty much a commune, hippie land. And they fall in love with the place and the people, and they decide to stay, but then wacky things start happening. Then Rob Schneider comes along. Alright, he doesn't come along. That would actually make it an awful movie instead of just a meh movie. But there's very wacky hijinks ensue, and they take drugs and get super high, and then crazy stuff happens. That's kind of the movie. And there were parts that were good. I think Alan Arkin plays the old owner of the commune, and he actually is probably one of my favorite characters in this. He's one of the more likable ones. I don't mind Paul Rudd, and Jennifer Aniston and him have decent chemistry, which is nice. They've been in a few movies together, I know, but not for like maybe 10 years now. What did you like about it, Mike? Any characters that stood out for you?
I kind of liked the hippie character that was kind of Gobluth-ish, but then he was just okay at the beginning, and then it sort of got worse and worse and worse towards the end.
There's also, it's Job Bluth.
Whichever.
You fail at being an Arrested Development fan!
They call him Gob. That's the joke.
So it's not actually... He's a little Jobish, but it's this very, like... He
goes into that
he
same
looks like
vocal tones.
He looks like Charles Manson. That's the funny thing. So I think that was probably part of it, but he has the exact look of a Helter Skelter era Charles Manson, just super crazy, super wild hair, and he's in a commune. So I was wondering if they were going to actually have the twist be that this is actually a very cultist commune. But yeah, he's just, you kind of like him at the beginning because he is kooky and crazy, but he gets really, really grating. And I think that's probably the problem with most of this movie. There are a lot of wacky characters that you find at this commune, and they're really charming, even when they start to annoy the protagonist, who's really Paul Rudd's character.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure quite yet until like not even the middle, until like the first act was over. Then you really start to get that this is supposed to be through his point of view. But even when the characters start to get grating to him, I start to go, well, they're still kind of funny, and there's still parts, but then they just kept going, and the large majority of them are just obnoxious after a while. And it becomes that really old standby of our protagonist is the one person that always gets in trouble, and everybody takes the wife's side on stuff, and there's... You know what it's like? It really is like Meet the Parents in a lot of ways, where everything bad happens to the protagonist, and it's funny, but you feel bad because it's not really his fault, and it just feels awkward. Actually, one of the things I wrote down in my notes while I was watching was awkward the movie. That's kind of what this is. Even before the commune, it was just awkward, and not funny awkward, just awkward.
There are some things that are funny, but usually the jokes go on for too long.
Mm-hmm. Or they go too far. There was a part... you know what? I wouldn't even call that opening scene a joke, but there's a part at the beginning where they're about to buy an apartment. And the realtor starts talking about her husband. And it doesn't feel genuine. She starts talking about the personal life of her and her husband, and it wasn't really provoked. And
it just felt like an odd thing to just go on about.
I'm wondering how much of this was actually scripted and how much of it was free flow improv. Because there's actually probably the worst scene, easily one of the worst scenes in the movie, was Paul Rudd trying to psych himself up to have sex. And it goes on he's looking in the mirror and he starts saying things that he thinks is sexy. And at first it's not even that funny, but it's like, oh, okay, I get where they're going. And then he keeps going and it becomes obscene. It's not even obscene, it's obtuse.
It just goes too long.
It goes too long, and then it keeps going over and over the same thing, just slightly worded differently.
It would be fine if they did it like maybe 3 or 4 times, but it goes on to like 17 and 18 different
And then
jokes.
they have another scene, and then they have the exact same thing happen, but he's telling it to someone else. And then that one goes on way too long, and the characters in the movie become uncomfortable, and I'm just thinking, how do you think we feel? Because we're not enjoying ourselves. And I think the biggest problem with it is that for the most part, the jokes that are supposed to be frustrating the protagonists are also entirely frustrating the audience. Now, not all the audience, because there were people in the back cracking and laughing. They're probably the same ones that went to the Smurfs and laughed when What's-His-Face pissed in the wine bucket.
Same people who probably went to see Jack and Jill.
Yes. Same people who thought Transformers 3 was the best of the series. It was so... Alright, so some of the other good parts about it. Believe it or not, I really like the nudist in it. Not for the nudity. Although, just a fair warning, I would not see this with anybody that you don't feel comfortable discussing sex with. Because there's a lot... Not only sex talk, but you see a lot of genitalia of both genders.
Throughout the entire
movie. Now, most of the penis is just from that one guy, who did a good job, but again, it's a lot of penis. So if you're not comfortable looking at a man running full on with the junk flapping in the wind.
There's a whole probably minute of this film that's devoted to his penis.
I think Paul Rudd got paid well because he had a real penis put right in his face in many different scenes. Yeah. Like a good amount, like just full on semi-erect at some point.
Now
penis.
the quip he had at the end of the movie though was funny.
Yes, because even some of the women go, because he says, is there ever a time I will not...
No, is there ever a day you can spend on this place without getting a penis in your face?
And all the women go, yeah, I think we can all agree that that's really annoying. Like, even they agree. So, and I think, so one of the things I will say for it, and it redeems itself slightly towards the end with this, is that the idea that it's okay to be a hippie if you're not pretentious about it, which I thought was kind of the message. But it took so long to get there, and the protagonist goes through so much crap before that by that point I was done. It's almost too much. It felt a lot like in the Meet the Parent movies where the character just gets shit on. Almost, actually, literally at one point, I'm not kidding. It just felt...
Things were too dragged out.
It felt unpleasant. There were parts of this movie that felt unpleasant. But, so, a slight backtrack. The nudist I actually really liked. His character felt one of the more developed. I really liked where they took it, because they could have taken it in a different direction with his resolution. And I really liked Alan Arkin's character, who was less bullshitty about the whole hippie commune thing than a lot of the other characters were. I liked Paul Rudd and Jennifer Aniston's chemistry. I didn't necessarily like their characters.
Yeah, Aniston really just...
She doesn't bring a lot to... She's just Jennifer Aniston. Yeah, kind of. I mean, one of the things that drives me crazy is that there are so many nude scenes in this movie. And I'm not saying you have to do a nude scene, but when you're one of the only characters that doesn't do a nude scene, she flashes someone, but it's obvious that it cuts away. And in a movie that has people naked running, just flat out naked running with their everything hanging out. Excuse me.
I think just about everyone in this movie got naked on screen at some point.
I don't think Paul Rudd did.
Besides Paul Rudd and Jennifer Aniston, everyone else pretty much did.
I think, I can't be sure. I think some of the other hippies might have been back, like their butts, but not necessarily boobs or penises. But it felt when it happens, when Jennifer Aniston's flash and then cut away from the flashing happens, it's full on. She's just she's looking right at the camera and she's about to take her top off, and that felt really why do it if you're not going to? It felt
fully through.
Yeah,
and then it cuts away, and then later it's the video back to it, and it's blurred
because it was on television. Yeah. It felt very off in a movie where we have a lot of nude people. I said, not everyone, so it's not like she was the one person out, but it felt like they were trying to go oh look, and it's so played up in the commercials, and I think they've mentioned it oh, she has a nude scene. It doesn't count if you show your back. It just doesn't. I'm trying to think. Oh, we haven't talked about this. The brother character. So again, Paul Rudd's character is about to go live with his brother, and it is the worst character I've seen in a very long time. It's supposed to be bad, don't get me wrong, but it gets to a point where it stops being funny.
Instead of being funny annoying, he's just annoying.
Even the jokes he makes, even the jokes at his own expense, everything he does is really... I get where they were going with the character, but he gets really angry and starts stomping around, and we're supposed to find it funny, and I find it really disturbing. It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't enjoyable to watch, and when you have a comedy, it's supposed to be enjoyable to watch. And I think that's it. A lot of the characters are good, but they're surrounded by this plot and these characters that aren't
good.
That aren't enjoyable to watch. Not even likable. I'm okay with unlikable characters. I'm not okay with characters that make you feel just not pleasant while watching it. You don't feel like you can actually laugh at them. So I think really that's about it. I really hated the way they resolved things in general, because they make an antagonist. We won't even tell you which person it is, but they make an antagonist out of one of the characters, which you kind of saw coming, but it feels like a really cheap way to do it. Because I think the whole message of it is they don't really go against the commune thing, but they needed a way to have the two main characters, find a way to get close to each other again.
Have some kind of struggle for them.
Yeah, it felt really, really forced and last minute and a really cheap way to do it. And
then even then, they have the whole ending that they just tack on at the end, saying a year later, and it's they resolve everything.
Yeah, I didn't mind the year later thing. I didn't mind that as much because a lot of the characters I liked actually got a resolution.
But I liked all the resolutions they added to the end year later, but I didn't nothing in the movie really, it felt like it was leading up to these resolutions, but you never saw how they occurred. You never saw all the, any of it develop. You just saw the openings.
For me, there were good characters in here that got some screen time, but could have been more developed. And when you have a scene like the one with Paul Rudd talking in the mirror that was unnecessary, half of it could have been cut out easily. Probably 2/3 of it could have been cut out. And when you have at least 3 or 4 minutes of just awkward unpleasantness, that you could have devoted to some more character development for some people that
or
we
more ending resolution. See, like what I was about to say.
I didn't mind the ending resolution though because it was like an epilogue. If they did something in the middle, it's not that bad. But
I know, but all the conflicts get resolved off screen. It feels like you're reading a book and you get to chapter 7, and then all of a sudden it skips ahead to chapter 18.
I didn't have a problem with that. You could have had a problem with that. That's one of the things I didn't necessarily have a problem with because they do epilogues in movies and books all the time.
Yeah, but I mean it didn't, because all the conflicts, they like introduced a bunch of conflicts and then they get settled off screen.
Yeah.
And then they give you the epilogue where, oh, this is how everything turned out. And it didn't feel right to me.
Okay, I'm cool. You're fine to have your own opinion about that. I just didn't have a problem with it necessarily. Something else we haven't talked about is the director is David Wayne, and he's also a part of the group Stella, and the entire Stella cast, the trio, is in this movie. I'm hoping that's not like a surprise cameo, but it's cool that they were together. You get to see them do some stuff, so that was enjoyable. And actually, just today, Mike was saying, "What's Michael Ian Black been doing lately?" Because we saw an article about him.
Yeah, you were reading an article on the way home about him, and then I was like, "Is there an article about Michael Ian Black? What has he done in the last 4 years?" Then you point out he wrote a book, and I was like,
"Oh well."
Well, whatever.
What, he hasn't done a movie. And then he was in a movie. I'm trying to think if there was anyone else. I mean, there were just too many things. There were too many really big stereotypes. Oh, by the way, the brother was racist. That was another thing. He cheated on his wife. He was obnoxious. He was just, none of his jokes, the jokes that he made in the movie were funny, and none of the jokes for the audience were funny. And he was a total racist.
Yeah. I didn't like his wife either, but...
The wife was slightly better because...
At least she had a character arc.
And there was some subtlety to... Not necessarily to the character, but the way that they at least said...
Played her.
Yeah, I would have been okay with her. And I get that the two of them kind of go together in that she doesn't make sense. The way she acts doesn't make sense without that kind of horrible... But I liked her better than the husband.
Yeah.
But I think the problem was that they played up too much of these hippie stereotypes that we've seen